On June 3rd, I hopped on my very first Ryanair flight, and I took a plane all the way from the Stansted Airport in London to Warsaw. I landed at the Modlin Airport. The flight went really well. Ryanair didn't even charge me extra for my luggage, which everyone warned about. The only part I didn't like was, of course, flying over the ocean. And it was weird waving goodbye to London and saying hello to Poland. And when we landed, let me tell y'all, I thought that we were going to be landing in the middle of nowhere at first, but it turns out the Modlin Airport is just quite a ways away from the actual city of Warsaw, which was fine. I just hopped in an Uber, and that's when I started to realize things might get a little harder for me because I can't read any of the signs. And that was true for menus and all that jazz as well. Now, not only was the city beautiful, but most hotels had a really cool deal where it was free to stay there if you were a Ukrainian refugee. So I thought that was really, really cool, and the view from our hotel was just beautiful. And so the first day, since I was there alone waiting for my boyfriend to meet me, I decided to sit down and get some work done. And later that night, I decided to go for a little walk in the park, which was a little bit darker. So instead of walking all the way back, I decided to hop on a scooter, which I could have sworn was going way faster than this. The next day, things got a little bit easier because my boyfriend Zach flew in, and he speaks Polish because he lived here for 2 years. He went to school here. And he got me a little bag because their family knows a guy who makes these little leather bags, and I love it so much. And then we took a walk through the park because he knew all the spots and was able to show me around Warsaw a little bit. And it was so nice, just beautiful out, and we saw this willow tree and decided to go over to it and get inside of it, and it was like a little bubble. I loved it. This entire park used to be a space for the king's bathroom, which Zach just said. He said bath. So I thought that was interesting, and then we stumbled upon this old theater, and there were peacocks there. I asked if peacocks were local, and apparently they just fly in a few. There's like 4 of them. And so this guy was putting on a show. And honestly, I think he started making his feathers come out after Zach whistled at it, so I think the peacock might have been into him. After the peacock was done with his show, we kept strolling around and saw things like the sun clock and just gorgeous scenery. Later that night, I got to meet one of Zach's old friends named Gregors, who I absolutely love.
Okay, I'll just hide it. Yeah.
It was so awesome to meet him, and I could tell that Zach was excited, and I loved seeing that. What you're looking at now is the market that we went to. Apparently here people usually buy groceries day to day, which is interesting. There's no bulk buying. We got some blackberries, and later we ended up in the Old Town area. All of this looks super old, but most of Warsaw was actually destroyed in World War II. We got a little bit of ice cream and sat and enjoyed the view. And then we saw this little bridge that had all of these locks on it, and I love things like this. It made me so happy. Later, Gregors took us to a bar that was literally underground, which was bizarre. And then later that night, we sat by the river and enjoyed a beer where it used to be illegal up until just a little bit ago. And then after the sun goes down, everybody came out and it was like a big party. There we all are, just strolling along. And by the end of the night, Gregors had us getting 12 shots to all share. Yeah. Polish people can drink, but I think we were able to keep up.
Are we getting into this, both of us?
The next day, we got on a train and drove first class from Warsaw down to Krakow. Krakow, I don't know how to say it properly even after this. But here we met Zach's other friend named Mihir and his girlfriend, and they showed us all around the town. We went to this place that looks abandoned but is a bar, enjoyed some drinks, kept walking and saw this really cool church, and this lady was feeding birds. And if you're wondering if right when we sat down she made them come over to us, the answer is yes. So we were surrounded by birds, which was unsettling. But the entire hike up there, we were trying to get to this hill to see a sunset that was definitely worth it. Afterwards, they kept walking and took us actually to the site where Schindler's List was filmed, which was crazy. And it was so great that we actually decided we had to come back during the daytime. And if you remember at all from the movie This House, where this guy would sit there and shoot people, well, this is that house. It was so insane to be standing in the same area and room where all these iconic shots were filmed. And we kept walking and got to see the guard towers. And it was a long way down, so we were very careful. Then I saw this structure, which looked pretty sturdy. You can see the spiral staircase on the left. So I decided to stroll on up there, and it was sturdy, good news. And the view from on top was incredible. And we could even see the structures where the camps used to be. And we kept walking, and at the end of this trail, we saw these trees that had fallen down, but we also found a place where we could make a fire. So we lit up a fire and cooked some hot dogs. And later that night, we had Indian food and said goodbye to his friends. And it was overall a great trip. And we hopped back on the train for our next destination, which was Wrocław. Wrocław is such a beautiful city and is home to the famous Grotowski Institute that we have learned about in my physical theater class for the past semester. I got to study under Marjorie Hayes, who studied directly under Grotowski, and her agent is actually Grotowski's assistant, or was his assistant for a good amount of years. He's no longer alive, but it was so crazy to be in the same town as this famous institute. All the art was just beautiful, and our hotel was sitting right in the heart of the Wrocław Square. We saw these little gnome guys, which you can tell his nose has been rubbed off because you're supposed to touch it for good luck. And the first day when we got there, we took a stroll and did some laundry and saw all of the cool artwork around the town and just enjoyed our time together. Because the next day I was busy meeting back up with my professor Marjorie, who took me on a tour of the Grotowski Institute. We got to meet up with her agent, who was Grotowski's assistant, and her name was Stefa. As we were making our way to the actual performance spaces, we saw these figures, and they're doing poses that we were learning how to do in class, which I thought was really cool. And this was the best part. We got to be in the room that Acropolis was filmed, which was this really old movement piece, and we had learned a lot about it before. There you can see the space a little bit better. Everything has changed a lot.
The score is great because it has all the famous actors, their sweat in it.
And then afterwards we went back down to the library, where we met this guy named Tobias, who showed us all of these other resources for learning about Grotowski. Later that evening, Marjorie, Steffa, Zach, and I went back out, and Marjorie took us all out to dinner, which was super sweet. And you can just tell how much these two really love each other. It was so awesome to sit and hear all about their stories, and I know that they had a good time seeing each other again. After dinner, unfortunately, Steffa had to leave, and Marjorie took Zach and I on a tour of Wrocław and the Marjorie tour. We got to see where she used to be directing and acting in shows, and I could just see her face light up. It was really, really awesome. And on our way out, we saw one more busker. The next day, we left at 6 a.m. to go from Wrocław back to Warsaw. And this day ended up being a little bit of a disaster. We booked the hotel room for the wrong day, and we found this hostel, but they had to have a little bit of time to get our room ready, so we went and got some breakfast, mimosa, and some coffee, and then decided to take another stroll around Warsaw for our final day. We were in this beautiful park, just having such a good time, and I found these Joker stairs. They look just like the stairs from the movie Joker, so I made Zach go up there and do a little jig. We found our way back to the old lock bridge that we saw the first day, and we brought our own lock this time, so we got to add it to the bridge, which was really special for me. Here's a little tour of the hostel. They had a nice little kitchen area, and honestly a really, really great place to stay for so cheap also. And we left our Tide Pods that we had been using all trip there for more people to use. You can see they had a really nice bathroom, and we actually had our own private room, so that was nice to not have to share a room with 8 other people. We had this little room which was so nice. When you walk in, you could see a TV, which we were listening to some Polish TV, and a really nice little bed. And here's our room. We had some drinks. And there I am last night in Poland. I only got a few hours of sleep because my Uber was there to pick me up bright and early at 3 a.m. So if you're wondering 3 a.m. in Warsaw what that looks like, it is this. But I had to make it there for my flight from Modlin all the way back to London Stansted. My flight left at 5:55, so I got there in plenty of time to start my journey home all the way from Poland. My time in Poland was really, really great. I was surprised at how nice everything was and how nice the people were. There were a lot of refugees there, and everybody opening their arms up to them, and it was just nice to see. I was flying into London Stansted, but as you can see, that is nowhere near Heathrow, so I had to hop in an Uber and get there. And then on the way there, I find out my flight was canceled, and they got me on a new one finally, but this was my state afterwards. I was not well. It was not fun. They made me get on a flight that was earlier, but that's okay. We were now going to Detroit instead of New York. There is something very unnerving about loading the map up and seeing that you are over the middle of the ocean. There is something very awful about that made my stomach turn. But I made it to the Detroit airport and realized I lost my glasses, so the day got even worse. Didn't love that. This kind of sums up my day. But I ended up making it all the way home from Detroit to DFW. Home sweet home, so it was a lovely trip. Yeehaw. And I am back in Texas, and I'm reporting from my closet because I'm packing up. I have to be out of my apartment in a week, so that's a little stressful, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up by saying my time in Poland was so wonderful, and abroad in general, it was really, really changing. Like, I don't know, in my head, it's hard to actually imagine people living with these other cultures and just societies and little, it's so hard to put into words, but growing up in Texas my whole life, everything was just so far from what I know, and it was really great learning and getting to know people and see different artwork and shows, and I just couldn't have asked for a better time. And I feel so incredibly lucky to have had the opportunity to be abroad. And I hope to be back one day. I think my time getting back to Texas was so hard. It feels like a bit of a sign that I need to stay in Europe. So we'll see how long until I'm back. But thank you, and maybe I'll talk to you then.